Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. You are about to join a frequency that will open your mind, expand your heart, and activate your spirit. Thank you for joining Kelly Meehan, Spirit Baby Medium and Master Energy Therapist. Kelly believes in the power of the Spirit Baby. She speaks with babies in spirit before life, in the womb, and after life. She supports, teaches, and guides others to tune into the intuitive and mystical parts of life for greater wisdom. Join her in meeting your soul baby and build your connection and relationship with deep love and trust. Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio with your host, Spirit Baby Medium, Kelly.
Welcome to episode 102, December 4th, 2020, Using the Creative Energies for Fertility with Art and Emotion. I have a special guest episode, this episode, 102, and I always kind of go into how I've met people, and I feel like we've connected maybe through Facebook, through an email, and just I'm so open when people are emailing me, and I feel inspired by their journey or, for me it was like, creativity and art and fertility, and I think that out of over 100 episodes, I want to say, I don't know if anyone's ever really talked about creativity and art. This could be like a golden episode here. I'm trying to think in my mind. There's been so many different areas and topics, but I want to welcome Jasmine. I'm going to read her little bio here. Jasmine Katakaran is a fertility warrior who struggled to have a child for 6 years. After multiple IUIs and her second IVF, she was told that she had less than 1% chance of having a baby and to stop trying. However, Jasmine didn't give up. Using her background as an artist, she applied an artist mindset to overcome her roadblocks and design a life that gave control of the fertility journey and life moving forward. As a result, she became pregnant within months of being told she had less than a 1% chance. Today, Jasmine now has 2 kids, both through IVF. Welcome, Jasmine.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for having me here.
And I also have here, thank you for being here. You have a designer point of view and tools that you can access through your website, it's like a free fertility training, which will be available through my website. You'll be able to access that and connect more. But I want to hear this journey, this 1%, that doesn't sound very, how do you even receive that? But give me a little bit, tell us a little bit about your story, what's been going on and how you got to that place of having your children.
I'll tell you a brief history of my story. So, I grew up pretty well, I have to say, and there's no big complaints there. And I did grow up with this kind of built-in idea of what my life should be, like what the perfect life is. And it was, studying hard, getting to good school, getting a job, getting married, having, the 2.5 kids and the picket fence and working hard and retiring. And I have to say I was kind of blindly just following that path, checking off the boxes as I went. And it wasn't until I reached having the 2.5 kids, and I still remember how naive I was. I had it all planned out perfectly. Married by 28, I would have 2 years to have fun, and then by 30, I was gonna start trying, and by 35, I'd have 3 kids, no problem, and then move on to the next checklist, right? And that's exactly what happened at age 30. I still remember I used to joke with my friends, as soon as I do the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, then right after that, I'm going to start trying. It's like a bucket list thing. And we did that, and it was, I still remember after the first month of trying, I jokingly said this, but I was like, I can't believe I'm not pregnant yet, And it was one of those things where obviously a month went by, and then 3 months, and eventually a year went by, and we never got pregnant. And I started getting really anxious and concerned. So that's when we started seeing fertility specialists. And we did all the necessary, the preliminary tests that you normally do. And nothing came out, out of the blue. They said we were both healthy everything seems okay. But they're like, it's been a year, so something must be up, right? So at that point, they diagnosed us with unexplained infertility, which is a very frustrating diagnosis because it's like, right. You want to figure out what to solve, right? And then to get like unexplained, it's that feeling of like, well, there's something wrong, but we have no idea what it is. So, which led me down a path of just like endlessly trying so many things and, never knowing what's going to work, which happens in fertility. There's no like one guaranteed way. It's like a lot of trying in the dark. And we ended up doing several IUI procedures from there, and nothing took. But like within a blink of an eye, it had been years. Like at 1 year turned into 3 years, and still I had not been pregnant once. And yet we were doing all the fertility treatments, and we were exhausted. And we ended up after several IUIs, we decided to go to IVF, which is in vitro fertilization. And I still remember thinking like, okay, we're doing IVF. This is going to work out. It's like everyone gets pregnant from IVF, which is not true. But, it's one of those things. And I remember after the first IVF, I was really excited. At this point, we had been trying for nearly 4 years, and it was everything was going okay. There was nothing that stood out, and we retrieved about, I think, nine eggs, and we did the ICSI where they, inject the sperm into the egg, and we had around 5 or 6 that fertilized, which we were watching, and we had planned for a day 5 transfer. And at this point, it was like the closest I felt like I had to being pregnant. I was like, okay, like they're going to transfer and I'm going to get pregnant. I was like so excited. And I still remember the morning of the day 5 transfer when I was meant to go in and transfer. And this is after doing, all the IVF treatment, the medication, the surgical, removal. And this was the very last part where I was kind of like getting the transfer. I got the phone rang as I was going out the door, and it was the clinic, and she said, I remember the nurse said, it was like, your appointment's been canceled. You don't have to come in. And I just like stopped and I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean it's been canceled? Like, how is that even possible? I didn't even think that was a possibility. I was like, no, this is my day. This is my day to, have a baby and get a transfer. And she said none of them made it to day 5. And I was devastated. It was like I did all that work and I never even got a chance to get the transfer. And we went to see the doctor at that point, and she came back and she's like, well, I think I have another diagnosis for you. It's no longer unexplained infertility, which we had been dealing with unexplained infertility for 4 years. It's now poor egg quality, because she was like, the fact that they didn't, make it to day 5 says that it's probably poor egg quality. So at first I was like very excited. I was like, oh, finally we figured out, the problem or the source. And my next question was like, okay, how do I improve my egg quality? And then she responded, well, you can't improve egg quality. It's not possible. And that's not the answer you want to hear. And I pushed her. I was like, what do you mean I can't improve egg quality? And then finally she was like hesitant, but she's like, well, some people say, acupuncture can help with egg quality. And at that point I was like, okay, I took it. She could have said anything at that point. She could have said go stand in the corner and jump up and down like a chicken. And I would have been like, okay, if that's going to improve my chances. because at this point I've done everything, and I actually had done acupuncture in the beginning, but I didn't stick to it. And the very next day, I was on the phone. I remember making the appointment with the acupuncturist before I even left the office to get an appointment. And I started seeing an acupuncturist that next day, and she suggested that I do like a complete detox of my body, because my body's been full of meds essentially for like 4 years. And I should, and then like do a detox of my body, do daily acupuncture, not daily, weekly acupuncture, and just reset myself and really start focusing on myself too, and to take 3 months off, which I had never done during this whole fertility journey, because I always every month was like go, 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 trying to get pregnant. So it was the first time I allowed myself to stop, and reflect and really get to know myself, which was huge. And I still benefit from that to this day. And I was ready after this kind of this time. I was all set to do the next IVF cycle, and about everything seemed pretty much the same as before, which was terrifying to me, because one of my biggest fears was the same exact thing might happen. And the only difference was the morning of the transfer, the day 5 transfer, instead of being at home, I was actually at the acupuncturist office doing a pre-treatment appointment for the transfer to prepare my body. And I was so nervous, and I still remember when she came back into the room after my treatment was over, she had this look on her face. And then I just knew. I was like, no. And she's like, they called. There's no transfer today. So the same exact thing happened. And I was devastated the first time. I was even more devastated the second, especially because that's the hardest thing with fertility, right? Like, you can work so hard and you can do everything, but yet there's no guarantee. There's nothing that might work or not work. It might work for someone, but not for you. And I still remember walking back with my husband from the acupuncturist office across the park, and I was crying and I was so upset. And at that point, I also had so much guilt in me that was building up, because at this point it was my factor, right? It was poor egg quality. And I didn't mention this before, but my husband is one of those people, when I first met him, and we met really young, but when you meet someone and they're meant to be something or do something, they'd be great at something. Well, for me, I knew he'd be a great father. Like, he's so much more paternal than I am. He's actually like a teacher by profession to young kids. And I was like, the fact that I could be the barrier to him becoming a father just ate me up inside. And at that time, I remember walking across the park. I actually told him, I was like, if this doesn't work, I need you to go. I need you to go find someone else, because I'll be okay. I'll figure it out, but I can't be the one knowing that you can't be a father because of me, And it's so hard. I still cry thinking about that moment, because it's so real. Of course he said no. He said, we'll figure it out. And then that night, it was one of our lowest, but we pick ourselves back up. I was like, okay, we're going to the doctor tomorrow. And that's the whole thing about fertility struggles too. It's it's this flow. It's this roller coaster of you got to fill yourself with hope and optimism, and then you get crushed. But then there's another cycle. So you need to you can't. So it's this constant roller coaster of emotion. So I went back into the office that next morning, and at that point I was 35. And so in my perfect scenario, I was supposed to have 3 kids by now. And I've never, at 35, I'm sitting across from this doctor's office, and she came in, and I was all ready to hear my options, right? I was like, okay, what should we do next? And then she started talking almost immediately about adoption and surrogacy and or whatnot, or adoption and donor eggs, I should say. And I like paused. I was like, wait, can we not do another cycle with IVF or like with my own eggs, right? Mm. And she said, no, I don't recommend that. I'm not going to do. She essentially told us like she's not going to do it. And I was like, is there no chance? Like, yes, I'm 35, which in fertility is like getting a little older, but I was like, I still feel young. I still feel healthy. And then that's when she just looked at me and she's like, I give you a less than 1% chance of having a child with your parents. And I know, and that, like with fertility, there's so many stats that are thrown at you all the time. And, but less than 1%, that was, that hurt a lot. And everything else blurred at that point. Like, I remember thinking, like, I'm just have 3 kids by now, and she just told me I have less than a 1% chance of having any kids, which is a nice way of saying you're not going to have kids in a way, right? Mm-hmm. So we left that appointment and devastated, of course, and I still remember, like, the crazy thing is, we hugged each other. We said, we'll talk about it later. And then we both went off to work, which now that I say it out loud, it's like crazy in hindsight. You know, it's like you're just being told that you can't have children. And then you're like, oh, I'm just going to go to work now and pretend nothing happened. Because obviously, like, that's the thing about fertility too. Everything's in, like, behind the scenes. No one knows what's going on. I would get teased all the time, like, why don't you have kids yet? Da, da, da. And then I'd have to, you know, smile it off and make a joke to my coworkers about it, but yet they don't know you've been struggling for 5, 6, 6 years trying to have a child. So I went into work that day, and by profession, I work in computer animation as a lighting artist, which is a very creative field, but it's also very technical that requires a lot of problem solving. And I just like started working because I needed to think about something else. But as I was working and trying to like solve a problem at work, kind of more of a technical creative problem, I was just, all of a sudden it occurred to me that when I have a problem at work, I look at it completely differently than what I had been doing with my fertility, like obstacles, right? Like at work, I really take charge, but I stand back and I like look at the situation, I gather the information, I get different perspectives on it, and then I make a decision and test and iterate. Where fertility, I felt like all of a sudden I realized I was just kind of how I was blindly following the path in my life. I was kind of doing the same with fertility. Like I go to one doctor and they would say something and I'd say, okay, that sounds good. Like I would never seek other opinions. And then I was like, wait, and that's when I was like, I am going to look at this a different way. Why do we approach work things differently than life situations so often, you know? So
can I pause you for a second?
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to miss all this amazing stuff that you're sharing in your heart this whole time, talking about, you know, the journey, the unknown fertility, and then there's a knownness to it, right? And we do hear a lot of egg quality is a really big piece to it for a lot of people, which is sometimes it's not accurate and sometimes it is accurate. And, but then you're still left in a lot of mystery. And I feel like I've always felt like in the conception journey, whether it's natural conception or getting, you know, support through technologies, there's always a piece that there's unknown. Like even like for me, I'm like, okay, I've naturally conceived, but it was like, I still can't fully say, will this being come to me? You know, am I too old? Am I too, you know, am I not going to be a good mother? They don't want to come to me. There's all these, you know, all these pieces of the journey that we create. And like you said, I feel like it was very valuable sharing about IVF. Like, you know, there's not like one way to do it. And of course you're going to the quote unquote expert of that, you know, but of course, as we know, fertility experts and medical doctors, clinics, they all have a different way of doing it. So that's where we get kind of like, oh my gosh, like, is this the way? Is that the way? one doctor may say, oh, it's all about the immune system. Another doctor may say, no, it's all about the egg quality. But then this is where I always like to really promote is obviously intuition and going how to sit with it. And I often tell women that come to me that I'm working with on an IVF journey, I say, okay, we're going to move really slowly. And slowly doesn't mean you have to sit for months and wait for anything. It means what is the energy that you're interacting with? Where is your emotional space? And what is those next steps, right? And kind of what I like to look at it as an unwinding to get to it. And I feel like you also said something really powerful too. It's about there's a loss aspect to it, right? There's the grieving because you're going year after year and you're working very hard. You are. And then you're going, what the heck? Like nothing where, it's exhausting. It's like, where is that next piece? And I love and I want to hear where you're going into now when you're talking about, how you adjust, how you look at your work, and how you're interacting with that and how do you then apply that to your health and wellness and even the journey towards motherhood. And I wanted to hear that creative piece. I'm curious. Because then I was looking at your website going, did you do those images at the bottom? I noticed those images did you design those with the pictures and the fun words?
Oh, yes. Those are from my Instagram account. So if you go to my Instagram account, those are my doodles. I call them my, photo
I love
doodles.
that. Did you come up with that idea? See, I thought even that was so creative.
I started doing that. Yeah, it's at a stress release, actually. I just started one night doodling over photographs. And
that's really good. I like the colors and all the. I also have. I used to run birth art shows, 2 birth art shows curated a long time ago, and also I was invited to be a part of a fertility, art show. And I've always loved the intermixing of conception, fertility, pregnancy, and birth art. And that just reminds me of that. But I like how the colors are. So, what is your Instagram? Let me get that. I don't know if I follow you. What is your Instagram? Everybody else can follow you too.
It's Jazz Katat, so it's Jazz, so 2 Z's, Katat. Jazz Katat.
So wait,
and I couldn't.
Katat? Is that what you said?
Oh no, Katat. Oh. Yeah. So it's the first 4 letters of my last name. Yeah. So Jazz with 2 Z's, Jazz, and then Katat.
The perfect imperfect life. Oh yeah, look at all those amazing pictures. I love that. Okay, everybody follow her. I'm following you now. Great. Yeah. So tell me about this creative piece you were going into.
Yeah, it's like a creative mindset of creative problem solving, really, in the way. And I couldn't agree with you more when you were talking about going with your intuition and your gut. And like you said, doctors, have differing opinions. And I think what we have to remember, or what I had to remember, is that doctors are just humans too, just like us, right? There's nothing... and they have their opinions, and they also are human, so they aren't always right. But I feel like with, especially doctors, I mean, I have full respect for my father is a doctor, but we give them this kind of pedestal that I think we have to kind of knock it off a little, think about it as speaking to a colleague, like someone else that is okay, and really value their opinions, but then also gain knowledge. So that's where the creative kind of mindset comes in, because I'm thinking about when you're struck with any kind of problem or obstacle, the biggest thing is to get as much feedback as possible and to get different perspectives is key, because we all have different perspectives, and the more perspectives we get, the more we can evaluate the situation. And make the best choices for us, right? Because the best choices for someone else might not be the same. So that's what I did in my fertility. I looked at that and I said, okay, let me look at this objectively. Pretend it's not me that I was just told I have less than 1% trying to have a kid. What would I do? And I was instead of just, I could give up right now, right? Which, definitely crossed my mind. At this point, I've been trying for over 5 years. I'm exhausted in every way, exhausted physically, emotionally, in every aspect of life. So that's when I was like, okay, or I can start seeking other perspectives and collaborating, almost like a creative collaboration in
I
a
like
way.
that,
and
the way you say that. The way you say that,
yeah.
other perspectives, like you're all building a collage together.
Yeah. And, each perspective is really interesting and has its value. So what I did was I went to my acupuncturist, who is towards the more Eastern medicine side of things, to get her perspective. And then I went to see other doctors too, to get at other clinics to get their perspectives on it. And what happened was, when I went to see my acupuncturist, she was kind of like, I'm not sure if you should stop. She kind of agreed with me, with my intuition. Like, I don't know if that doctor, you should go, like, what that doctor said. She's like, and then she actually recommended another doctor, another clinic that she thought would be a good fit for me to see. So I went to him and had a consult with him, and he went through my charts, and to just get his perspective, he said, like, I agree it's poor egg quality, but I don't think I would agree with the less than 1%. And then he started suggesting other things I could do, which is also part of the creative process, where you kind of do testing and iterating stages. Because what occurred to me that didn't occur to me in the beginning was the first doctor that told me to stop trying it at less than 1%. We essentially did the same thing twice. Like, nothing changed in the protocol, right? And so it's like, imagine trying, if you think of it non-fertility, like, I tried to solve this puzzle once, it didn't work. I tried it again, I didn't change anything, but I tried to solve it again, and it didn't work. I was like, it's impossible, right? Yeah. It's like you never tried anything else. You didn't try to use another piece or something, And that's essentially what this doctor did. And I was about to agree with him. I was like, that's right. And that's the whole thing about design and creative thinking, right? You're always looking at how to adjust things, even just slightly. It doesn't have to be this great adjustment. You're just testing and iterating. That doesn't work. Let's test this one piece, and think of it that way. And that's exactly what we did with my fertility. And it was just one of those little tweaks, actually, where we're like, okay, 5 days does not work for you. Your eggs, the embryos do not last 5 days. Let's try, what if we try 3 days, a 3-day transfer? And at that point, I didn't even know a 3-day transfer, was possible, because I wasn't a doctor. I didn't know that was a viable option. And so that's really the one thing that we tweaked. We're like, okay, instead of a 5-day transfer, let's try a 3-day transfer. I'm like, okay, that sounds great. Let's try it. And we did. And this was only 3 months after that appointment that I was told I was less than 1%. And I got pregnant. So I got pregnant 3 months after that doctor told me I could never have a child, essentially, with a little tweak like that. And
I feel like that's you're saying it's really important what you're saying, because this is where, some women do come to me when they're at their wit's end, or they've been many years and they're trying to figure out, the balance of it, whether it's natural, whether a majority it is through intervention and support. And so I use the wording I use is changing energy. I go, what are you doing to provoke and change and create something a little bit different, as you said, to see, and that makes a lot of sense when you say that, maybe the porousness or we'll say the vulnerability of the egg, it may not need that many days. It may be too much, right, in that kind of environment. And then as you get to experiment, right, and I love that word experiment, and I use a lot of the words experiment and curiosity, because that's what we're doing when we're coming into that space. And so, I get that. I like that it's like you said, tweaking it, or bringing something a little different to see. And then you became pregnant. It was okay, it's there. Yeah. Now, is your son or your daughter?
That's my daughter. So my daughter's now 4 years old. And that's from that. And I do have a son too, that's almost, oh no, sorry, I said my daughter's 4. She just turned 5. My mind. So she's 5 and my son is 2 years old and he'll be 3 soon. Both from IVF, both from day 3 transfers. Which I still look at them and I can't believe that they're really here because there was so much time that I took. And I did, towards the end, I kind of resolved that, maybe I wasn't meant to be a mother. So I am so grateful every day for them.
That's the one, yeah. I hear that one quite often. And I tell women, it's okay to question that. It's okay to go into that little bit of darkness and the shadowy parts of what feels like a truth to you on some level. But it can be very illusionary, as we know. It doesn't make it an actual truth of reality. And I want to hear, I'm curious. I'm such an emotional processor, body, I'm so, that makes me, so thrilled, and that's where I like to take people. But I want to hear, even, maybe even when you're supporting people, what even that looks like. How do you really cultivate creativity in people? Because we say it to people, right? But then their actions, right, and going into that emotional process. What can you share about that? Or even your own experience? Did you feel like maybe there was a heightened emotion? Or I know emotions are very like a rainbow of multi-level experiences, but, can you explain more of that?
Yeah, I mean, when I did this for myself, and then what I did was I kind of stepped back to see what the process was exactly. And it's essentially how to get unstuck, right? How to get that feeling of freedom from the outcome almost in a way. And what I tend to do when I work with people, I have them stop and really do some self-reflection, some self-care. This is something that took me, I hate to say it, in my 30s until I really stopped and, could say I knew what my values were and what would really drive me and make me happy. Because I feel like we kind of assume things like a baby will make me happy, right? But essentially it's not really the child that's going to make you happy. It's you. It's within you. You have that power within you. So they go through and, figure out what will make them uniquely happy. And that way, that's like their compass. That's to make sure that's how they're going to fulfill themselves, right? As they move forward and knowing what to focus on. And then we take the challenge, whatever challenge that they're going through, if it's fertility, right? To reframe it, to step back from it, because we're so intimate, we're so in it, and it's hard sometimes to see the bigger picture, and maybe we're focusing on the wrong things even, right? So it's like reframing your challenge and that ability to step back and see that bigger picture that needs to be addressed. And what that does is essentially it broadens your outlook, and then it gets you unstuck, because usually you can see that there are several solutions, not just one, to whatever obstacle that you're trying to solve, right? And then that's when you start explore. This is where you start having, the next step is you start having fun. You start thinking of creative solutions, all the paths that you can go to, find that path to your happiness or whatnot. And what that does is, once you kind of relieve that pressure that there's more than one way to solve, all that stress and all that stress kind of melts away a little bit, right? And the pressure, because there's a plan. It's okay, we're gonna try this. If that doesn't work, I got this. I'm going to try this the next step, right? And I think that was big for me as I was going. When I didn't have a plan, and then you just feel lost when something doesn't work. You put all your eggs in one basket, and if that doesn't work, it's you just feel like nothing's going to work. But that's not true. There's always that iterating and the testing. If you just think of it as a process, and it's life doesn't always work out the way you envision it, right? But often it works out even better.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Isn't that always true, right? I
it
mean,
is
it's
really
true, yeah.
Yeah. So if you think of it that way and you kind of relieve that stress and the pressure on, one thing working, you'll be surprised. It often happens, it happens to work for you when you take away that pressure. And then the biggest thing for me is like action, right? To take action and execute whatever plan that you have and always moving forward. I think it's that feeling, especially with fertility, it's like feeling like you're putting your life on pause. Like, oh, I'm not going to do anything until this works, right? And that's really hard. So it's kind of, always taking action to move forward. So no matter what's going on, you're always moving forward. You have that feeling. And it's funny you mentioned, like going to that dark place of where, like, what's going to happen if I can't have a baby, right? And there was years where I refused to even think about it. It was like one of those things, like, you don't want to think about it because that's your biggest fear. And if I think about it, then maybe it's going to happen. But what happened when I finally sat down and faced that fear, I sat down with my husband. I was like, okay, what will life look like if we don't have a child? And we worked it out. We talked about it. And at the end, we're like, hey, that's not that bad. We could do that. And all of a sudden, like, it's kind of what you said. It's not like we're saying that's going to happen, but all of a sudden it's no longer a fear. It's not this like thing that we're trying to like escape. It's like, okay, that's the worst case scenario. Okay, that's fine. Like, we have a plan for that now, and life's going to be awesome in a different way. And that relieved a lot of pressure too, and a lot of stress. So if any of your listeners, I think that's a huge thing. And I actually encourage people I work with to, face their fears, like work it out. What's the worst case scenario? And often you'd be surprised that it's not that bad.
Isn't that
it's not
amazing?
as good, right? Yeah, it's like not
true.
as bad as you think.
It's bringing in. I feel like when I'm working with fear with people, it's like really bringing it in and like, but we do that. I do that too. It's like, oh, it's so uncomfortable. I want to push it away. I don't want to think about it. But then it's like, what if because you're already uncomfortable with it anyways. I'm like, what if you were to like hold it and like breathe with it and let it really kind of settle into your body and then see or talk it out, like giving it a vocabulary, because it's the mind process that over kind of thinks things. And so, and seeing how it sounds like you like very similar to, I feel like how I like to view people too, and their kind of, multi-level consciousness, like everybody is so different. And you got to experience that in your own body and your own conscious awareness to go, wow, there's so many different ways to receive our children, right? And I've seen people do it. I've seen people go through, IVF, or sometimes it's embryo adoption, and sometimes it's, baby adoption, or it's surrogacy. And I've worked with all those different levels from, the emotional, spiritual, energetic space to see, and of course with baby energy, I get a lot of conversations going with babies. And, but there's also, it's a two-way street. It's not just one or the other. It's like the whole team to say. And, I know, and you probably know this too, is that I don't know where the stats are or the statistics are even now in 2020, but I read somewhere in some psychology website that, women and men that have infertility issues have higher chances of conceiving infertility, or, maybe not conceiving, but, creating a family when they get emotional, that psychological support. Have you read that? You probably heard about that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes complete sense after especially going through it on my own.
Yeah. Getting that extra
so,
support from somebody. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I completely agree, because fertility is not just physical. It covers everything. So that report does not surprise me at all.
I always have this image in my mind, like when I think about like creativity and art and creating conception, I think of this is my little like fantasy, like we could just sit in a room and get canvases out and sculpt things and paint things to get to our healing, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's exactly how those doodles started that you see on my Instagram. It's because I was stressed out one evening, and I just took out my iPad and I started drawing, and it was such a relief. And I think visualizing too is huge with anything, and seeing something on paper. I actually also create this thing where, you know, people can create their future selves and their current selves to like really visualize where they want to be, and then kind of create that roadmap to get there in a very creative, interactive way. And yeah, I just find it so much more effective when you're actively, you know, doing something like that, opposed to just, you know, reading a book about it, or even, I think I'm more visual than content, but like even more so than just writing it down. So like drawing it out, seeing it on paper as a picture is so empowering.
Yeah, I love that. I do have some women from time to time will send me their personal doodles, and they look really, I'm like impressed. I'm like, that's a doodle? That looks like a masterpiece from my perspective. But they have these like, you know, like images of them like looking pregnant, or images of baby like in this, you know, nebulous place, or like, you know, nature, and it's just so beautiful. I'm like, oh, how inspiring. Yeah, how encouraging. And again, I'm like such a big fan of all kinds of art like that. I play around, not for conception, but I play around with sculpting like mixed media and stuff just for creative fun, because there is something different, I feel like, in the thought process. Like I know that when I'm creating something, I'm not really thinking a lot about, I'm kind of thinking like, oh, where is this piece going to go? What does it look like? But how it begins is not how it ends, right? It's so life, because you have an idea and you're like doing it, and then you're like, something's not right. It doesn't may not even look right, or you're just waiting for that, you know, when you're creating something and you're like, oh, that's it. But it can be frustrating, because then you're like, am I doing this this is creativity. It doesn't align in certain mental channels, right? It's like, and as we know in our world, everything is so pushed to be dominant in one way of thinking and being, and many of us are like, oh wait, what about this nebulous, psychic, mystic space is so a part of both worlds, and how to bring them in, especially in conception. You know, I take it back to going, my goodness, this is a soul you're bringing into this world. This is a big deal. This is not like, oh, I'm just gonna, you know, oh, here, you know, it's like, this is a big deal, and taking it to look at that. And even, you know, I imagine many women are sculpting it, drawing it, singing about it, dancing with it, you know, to bring in, like, you know, you talk about that creative connection. And I want everyone to go check out your Instagram and your images. I really like that. You can tell it looks like art to me. It's not, I've seen a lot of, I'm very visual too. I love pictures. I love art. And I see a lot of different, you know, images and things people share with their work. But when I saw that, I was like, oh, there's something really fun and playful, and it looks really unique. So you could definitely tell it's not just like a cut and paste thing. Like you put energy into it. Just like on your website, it has that image of you with the injection. It was like, oh, that looks, it's just, you know, and then seeing how you get to, you know, bring that to others, which is amazing. You get to inspire others to build and create, and in a way that doesn't feel pressured. It's like, okay, let's look at it, and then let's get you there. Let's see what those steps look like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I can agree more, especially, there's something about physically doing art, sculpture, drawing that creates this release, and that is so freeing. I often, now that I have young children, I often look at them and how they create and, you know, draw, and are just free to explore this creativity. And I'm curious, actually, watching them. I feel like they're my own little experiment. Like, when does that switch in our minds, you know? Because as young kids, we're always encouraging kids to draw and, you know, do all these things. But there is a time, I mean, I kind of remember it as a childhood where, like, art was no longer a priority. It was, you need to start focusing on the practical. So I think, I find it very interesting to tap back into, and I think that's why my doodles are kind of really whimsical and kind of, I'm trying, it was like my way of like tapping back into that whimsical, free flowing, like when you're a kid and you just have crayons and you're coloring on a piece of paper feeling.
Well, I love that. It's true with children. I think of my boys, and they have creativity in different ways, but you're making me think, because it does change. Even when I was a kid, I remember I was like 8 years old, and I was like, I want to go to art school down the street, and my parents let me go. And I actually remember, because I'm older than maybe you, but I used to draw Cabbage Patch Kids.
I had Cabbage Patch Kids.
And draw little houses and stuff, but it was really fun. And then something did change. You're right. It's like, oh, well, you got to do that math, you got to do that science, which is all good, but when you're not good at it, it actually is quite hurtful, like it was for me. I want you to share, how others can contact you, if you have anything happening, any, private work or events or whatever's coming up, as well as any final words along with that.
Yeah, I mean, they can contact me through my website on jazzkatat.com, which is the same handle as my Instagram. It's JAZZKATAT. And from there, you can get access to many resources, the free fertility training that goes more into this freedom method of, approaching your fertility with more of a creative mindset and problem solving. And you can also reach out to me for, strategy, coaching, specifically in this kind of creative mindset, one-on-one if you like. And then there's also this fun module that I have to create your present and current and your future self, to really envision visually what the future is and then how to get there. So, and of course, there's my Instagram. So there's plenty of ways to, contact me. Or you can just, send me a message and say hi. I'm always here.
Well, thank you for being here, being a guest on Spirit Baby Radio.
Yes, thank you, Kelly, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all for joining episode 102, Using the Creative Energies for Fertility with Art and Emotion. If you like my podcast, please subscribe, leave reviews. Thank you for joining. Currently, right now, I have Sacred Communication, a Spirit Baby Journal, and Spirit Baby Oracle, Answers from Spirit Baby, 2 products to add to your Spirit Baby communication for your journey within conception, pregnancy, and birth loss.
This is Spirit Baby Radio. Thank you for joining Kelly in the energy of awareness, love, healing, and soul communication. Please join the next episode at www.soulbabycommunication.com.